Hey guys, Jim with Jeffrey here. So today we'll be looking at a case study of one of my athletes and specifically the progression on his deadlift that we've made over time.
Nice, nice.
So with Eric's deadlift, when he first came to me, he informed me that he was experiencing lower back pains on a daily basis. It was really starting to affect the quality of his life, where he was having trouble sleeping, he was having trouble standing for prolonged periods of time, and so this was an issue that we had to address immediately. But before we get into that, I'll also want you guys to know that we also discovered that Eric had a bit of quite a significant anterior pelvic tilt. And what that means is because his pelvis was rotated upwards, so that put his back into a further arched position, and that it put him into a very cramped position in that lumbar. So the combination of the two factors together, it wasn't good for his lower back. So first of all, we need to pinpoint the main cause of that lower back inflammation that I was experiencing, and you guys can see that from a glance that at his initial setup, his initial position, we can see that his torso angle here is almost horizontal with the floor. So because he's got a very parallel torso angle, what that means is as soon as the barbell breaks off that floor, all that stress is going to go into his lower back, and that lower back is going to be eating up all that exposure and stimulus, and not his quads. So I've actually done a separate video on how to get into that perfect setup position where you're in that almost 45-degree torso angle, like the kind of average optimal torso angle in your deadlift setup. And so, just from here, just to break it down simply, Eric, his hip hinged too much without allowing for enough knee travel, and that's put his torso into a very horizontal position where it's eating up a lot of stress from that initial break. Now, if I play the lift in real time for you guys, you can see that throughout, from the get-go, breaking off the floor, that drive is all with that back is essentially pulling that barbell up with his back and not pushing through his quads. And this is like from here, even at lockout here, you can see that this is all back. And this is further corroborated, the stress that his back will be eating up at, it's further corroborated at lockout here, where we see our lockout, even though this portion of the lift, he has technically completed the lift, but we can see that he hasn't achieved the full extension of the hips because he's unable to drive them further through because of his initial starting position. So I'll play this again for you guys in real time. Just take note of how horizontal his back is mainly. So Eric informed me that he had been performing his deadlifts like that for quite some time. So that was the first thing that we had to address to deal with his lower back pain and progress his deadlift. So the first step in treating Eric's back pain and to improve his deadlift was actually to switch him over to a sumo deadlift. Now the reason for despite the fact that we haven't built a base with conventional yet, and we haven't built our foundation, we made that switch to sumo immediately because there were more pros than cons. So we ignore the need for a conventional foundation despite its greater translation for the other lifts. And we made that switch to sumo because first of all, it alleviated a lot of stress and pain on that lumbar that he was experiencing during the lift. And secondly, during all rehab, you don't want to stop a particular movement unless there's like extreme pain. You always want to keep doing a movement of some sort of a similar variation, just so there's consistent stimulus, but we want it to be a good stimulus. So when we made that switch to sumo and we did that test, he gave me feedback that it was very effective. It already started from just making that switch of a different deadlift variation. He told me that the stress and niggle that he was feeling on his lower back during the lift had decreased substantially. So we knew that this was a good step to go. So if we see here from his initial position compared to his conventional, his initial position, he's able to sit in a much more upright position. And so as a result of him being able to sit in a more upright position, his lumbar isn't eating up as much stress and he's using more quads during the lift. However, if I play this in fast time for you guys, I'll let you take a look. However, we then, despite so we kind of addressed the issue of lower back stress because of a parallel torso position, but then another issue appeared. So if you guys can see here that the same issue where breaking off the floor, Eric was actually using his back to initiate and complete the lift instead of his quads. You guys can see that there becomes a bit of an arch in his back because of him pulling with his back. So I'll play this slowly for you guys. I made a big jump. I'll play this here. So you'll see that here, particularly at lockout, from that lockout phase. Yeah, it looks like, unfortunately, this video it didn't have enough hertz, enough frame rate to capture it in a slower definition, but you can see here I've managed to get this angle, this screenshot capture here for you guys, and you can see that at his lockout position, there's quite a significant arch in his back because he's pulling with his back and not using he's not maintaining a silent or a flat back. He's using his quads. He's not using his quads, sorry, and he's using his back to initiate and complete the lift instead of using his quads. So that was the next step that we wanted to address. So the next stage that we addressed in his deadlift was the cue for Eric to maintain a flat back during his deadlift. So we hopped on a core and we really drew theory of maintaining a silent back during the deadlift met. Essentially, we didn't want the torso or the hips to rise at a disproportionate rate to the rest of the torso, just so we can maintain that flat angle. And you guys can see here that the immediate cue we used was to maintain a head down position, because when Eric maintained a head down position, so in his initial setup he maintained a head down, and then throughout the lift head only raised only proportionally. You guys can see that from what we can see from this footage is that he was able to maintain a flat back that traveled at a consistent rate throughout the lift. So the footage I've got here, it's been recorded at a side angle, and it's a much better angle than front on angle to view his back and how he's able to maintain a silent back. So from this footage here, you guys can see that compared to the first two videos, Eric he's able to maintain a much flatter back breaking off the ground. Like from initial breaking off the ground, his back is in a much better angle. It's consistently flat. It's not arched because he's not pulling with his back. And the hips haven't shot up at a disproportionate rate, so he's been successful in maintaining a flat back. Now in this session, we actually introduced in the concept of slack pulling and wedging in his deadlift, because the slack pull it really helps to negate some of that stress and some of that shock that goes to his lower back, as opposed to if he was just to yank the bar off the floor. You guys can see when I play this in real time that timing's not exactly there. He's currently in this footage, he's performing the slack pull and at the same time as his brace instead of doing it beforehand. So timing isn't there at the moment, but it's a great starting point. What I've got here next for you guys is just another side angle, reaffirming Eric's ability to really control his torso now. He's really able to even self-correct when he feels that part of his torso is out of position. So even though he has kind of drilled down torso maintaining flat back, that's still from every week it's still an aspect that we really want to drill. So you guys can see that from the initial position he's in a great flat back angle, and then throughout his lift even to lockout, you guys can see that he maintains that flat back, and no his chest nor his hips, that none of them shoot up disproportionately. And so another area to look at is his timing of that slack pull. It's not there yet. It hasn't been perfected where there isn't an evident slack pull beforehand, but we can see that the timing is improving significantly, where it's not throwing him out of position, where the slack pull isn't occurring even after his brace like in the previous video. So timing isn't 100% there, but it's definitely improving on a week-to-week basis. So the next step in his deadlift was that the major part of his technique where we want to address was getting a good slack pull and wedge. Now, because with that slack pull and wedge, as I mentioned earlier, it really helps to take stress off that lower back, because that slack pull it takes off the shock that yanking the barbell off the floor would cause on that back. And our goal, because of his lower back injury that he's had in the past, or he was still experiencing, but just slightly at this point, I believe. Our goal is always to be very careful and really maintain a good stability in that back. So with the slack pull, the main difference you guys can see from this video and the last one is that the slack pull here, he does it before his brace and before his wedge. So you guys can see right here, slack pull. So the main difference was just timing. So we hopped on a call. We really broke down the timing of that slack pull and the wedging and when that was supposed to happen in correlation to each other. So it would be slack pull first and then or a brace and then a slack pull and then a wedge. So that was meant to occur before the barbell even broke the ground. So you guys can see here that after he's set up into position, there's a very evident slack pull first and then a wedge in to complete his lift. So the timing of that is really looking great now. So at this point, form had really clicked for us and things were really starting to come together. He wasn't experiencing as that daily pain that he used to be experiencing in his lower back. So he was functioning a lot better. He was in a very happy state of mind. He was able to perform the deadlifts pain-free, which was a really good confidence booster. But you guys can tell that he wasn't 100% in the back. Like he didn't believe in his back 100%, and no athlete would be, like coming off a major significant life injury like that, where a key part of your body was affected and it affected him for quite a long period of time. No athlete would be 100% confident in their body straight after. So at this point, from here, form was pretty much mastered down, timing was there, maintained that silent back was there. He wasn't getting pain as a result of his form. So now it was all about building confidence and momentum. So from here you guys can see that as time went on, Eric he was able to really build confidence and really build momentum in his deadlifts. You can see that he had no issues with the timing of slack pull. He had no issues with maintaining a flat torso angle. So yeah, like we didn't, at this point we weren't getting day-to-day pains in the back. We were barely getting any pains in that lower back, and he was performing these deadlifts pain-free as well. So he wasn't experiencing any pain in the back anymore at this point. So that was a really good way of building his confidence and building his belief in the lift as well. You guys can see in the video here that we did have a bit of an issue with balance. You can see that from this point at his lockout, it was even too forceful where he went on. You can see that his toes here, it came up a little bit. He drove back because he drove through his heels, and that just caused his body to tilt in the backwards position, and that's just a little balance and stability thing that it's a very easy fix. He also, I believe after this session, he mentioned to me that this was just because of the flooring that played a factor as well. Just the flooring at that gym, it didn't create enough of a stable surface for him to push off evenly off. So honestly, that wasn't a big factor, for like a big worrying factor that we needed to address immediately. So because you can see in the next lift that it corrected itself. So maybe it was just an off session, or maybe it was just the flooring, but the main takeaway was that Eric is able to live day to day without any back pains, and he's able to perform the deadlift without any back pains either, because he's got form mastered down pat now. Now, so because we run programming through RTS where we learn of an athlete's time to peak, and then we cap their peak. We cap the program when it's past their peak or when it's reached their peak, just because it helps us manage fatigue and manage loading a lot better. So this was the final week of Eric's program, where it was, I believe he's a 6 week peaker, so this was his week 6, where based on past programs, this is traditionally the time it takes him to peak. So this was the last week that we will be running his deadlifts before we went into a bit of a deload or a pivot, depending on his goals and the program that we'd be running next block. I can't really remember which one we did, but basically this is the last week of his deadlift. You guys can see he pulled 160 kilos here, I believe maybe at an RP 7.5 or an 8. So because we didn't go for a heavy max out or like a max attempt like that, because we wanted to be conservative with his back. We didn't want to ruin all the progress we made, because it did take us quite a long time, just because we had to rehab first, and then we had to strengthen the back, and we had to fix up form as well, timing, that lower back, that slack pull wedge. So it took us, it was a journey for us, but then we got there in the end eventually. So we didn't want to risk endangering that lower back or regressing on any progress by doing a silly max out where it wasn't during competition. There was no need for it. So that's why we kept at a conservative 8 single to finish off the block, and it was a good finish to the block where you can see he was really happy with it. It really built his confidence, and it really builds momentum for next block even. So you guys can see that from his starting point where he was deadlifting in a I'll say it here, but I hope he's not watching this video. He was deadlifting in an almost horizontal, like a horrible horizontal conventional deadlift for that torso angle where all that stress is going on his lower back. He was getting pain. He's like 80-90 kilos bending over, and then we did the work, we put in the progress, and over time after a couple blocks he's able to hit this 160 kilos on a sumo deadlift with zero back pain during the lift and zero back pain on a day-to-day basis. So that wraps it up for Eric's deadlift progression. So hope you guys enjoyed seeing how his form has changed and how his body has changed over the time, where we did that bit of a rehab phase and we did that bit of a building phase. So that was the progression that he encountered. So now we look forward to next block and whatever that may hold for us. So hope you guys enjoy that. I'll catch you guys later. Take care.